On this week's episode, Jessica joins us to share her journey of strength through the process of the higher power. From transforming her physique with a strict lifestyle to competing in strongman competitions, all while pursuing and earning her master's. Finally, this episode of the Iron Huddle is sponsored by Torque Strength and Conditioning. Torque Strength and Conditioning is a great place to work out and offers a variety of programs such as Torque CrossFit, Torque Barbell, Torque Fit, personal coaching, and youth and teen development. And we hope you enjoy the podcast.
We're lucky enough here to have today a StrongWoman competitor. Okay. Jessica Putland.
Yes.
I got it right. Perfect. And we basically met you last week at the Strongman event that we live streamed. We got to see you compete. And you took first overall for your division and dominated. Maybe you took first overall for all women. I'm not even sure. Did they break it down like that?
No, they just do it by weight classes.
We can just say you did because no one knows.
I mean, yeah. I technically, I did lift more weight than all the other weight classes. So.
Yeah. There we go. There you go. And then what was your favorite event of that day that you did?
I love keg loads. And
Okay.
You guys probably saw me pop off after the keg loads because I think that was like the most perfect I've ever done a keg run. So,
yeah,
it was fast.
like sub 20 seconds. I just, Dave Osland, way back when I first started, taught me how to load a keg, and I've loved him ever since.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you were very inspired after you won that. I mean, it looked like you had just won the Super Bowl. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think
awesome
we were all
to see
kind of
that.
scared.
Yeah,
Like,
like,
kick our ass.
like shit, this means a lot to her to win this. You were getting after it. It was cool to see.
Yeah.
Which we thought was awesome being there too, because the atmosphere in that little area we were talking with Ken, we had on earlier about how, you know, first off the space was little. We thought it was kind of like a warm-up area.
Yeah.
And the fact that you guys, that Tim put on a great event, and he's so welcoming all the competitors, and you guys just cheering each other on and kicking ass and obviously doing your best was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Was it one of the best meets you've ever done, or how was that for you personally?
I would say that was probably one of my best performances. And it's really funny because like my last competition before this was World's Strongest Woman. So like, for some reason, everything kind of clicked this time, and I won the log, and I've never won an overhead press event before, and got PR on the yoke. This is the fastest I've ever run that yoke.
And how much was that yoke that day?
505.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So.
What do you squat normally?
My max right now is 330. I a year ago couldn't squat 285, and was lucky enough to get some sessions in with Ryan Stills, who's a Masters champion powerlifter out in Oregon, and he fixed my form. And my meet 2 weeks later, I squatted 308, and
wow.
So we've been ramping that up. And so I just talked with Timmy, who's my coach, about my goals for this year, and I really want to hit a 4 squat raw. So I'm going to be really working on that. It has great transfer for yoke, but also everything.
Yeah.
For sure.
And when you're doing the yoke, or let's say the different squats with Tim, or Timmy, is that his name? Yeah. Do you guys always do a regular back squat, low bar, high bar, SSB bar? What's variation? Kind of what you guys do, what you like best?
So in the last like 6 months, it's been back squat, and he lets us choose, like if you want a high bar, if you want a low bar.
Yeah.
My femurs are like literally 2.5 feet long.
Damn.
So I was like trying to high bar for years, and then when I was working with Ryan Stills, he was like, you should just try low barring.
Low
and
bar
it
and
fixed.
flats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have really, really bad ankle mobility, and so I don't always like tell people that I think that they should wear lifters, but just from high school volleyball, my ankles are fucked. So I wear lifters so I can actually like hit depth. So I low bar, and it's usually pretty like heavy triples, or maybe at most sets of 5, and
wow.
then accessory will either be SSB, box squats, or like sumo pulls, things like that.
Very cool. Okay. And so how did you get into all this? Start from the very beginning. So you were a high school athlete, it sounds like we were talking about before, and you're from Wisconsin, if that's right?
Yes, I'm from southern Wisconsin, a town called Belleville. And I guess like how I got into everything was I was trying to be a softball player. My mom was like college level softball player. My sister was like the third base player.
Wow.
Like I really wanted to be like that, but they were always putting me in the outfield, and I think it's because I'm really tall. But we didn't know that I had astigmatism yet at that point, and so like I had no depth perception. So every time I was trying to catch the ball, I would miss it, and it's very embarrassing, right? And there's a lot of pressure, and this was like middle school softball, and there was a high schooler, her name was Dana Thompson, who was like winning state every year in shot put and discus. And so she was like 6 years older than me and got a full ride to Notre Dame to throw, but ended up going to UW-Whitewater so she could play basketball and throw, and she was a national champion. And I just really wanted to be like her. So I was like, I think I'm gonna try throwing shot put. And so I was 12 years old, started trying out shot put and discus, and like wasn't great, but when you're getting ready to move into high school track, they want you to do the summer strength and conditioning. So when I was 13 years old was the first time I ever started weightlifting. And I'm sure I had awful form. The reason why my traps are so big is because I lifted with bad form for so many years.
But now it's paid off.
Yeah, yep. So now my traps are huge, and we had to like relearn a lot of stuff. So in high school, I never made it to state. I was consistently getting like 4th place at sectionals, and in Wisconsin you have to get top 3 to make it to state.
Okay.
But my senior year, I was still getting recruited by D3 schools and some D2 schools to throw. And Hamlin University contacted me, and I got a letter from them that my coach gave me, and I went to my mom. I was like, I don't want to go to a school called Hamline. Like, that sounds so dumb. Like, I'm not going to do that. And she was like, well, we're already going up to the cities. I was touring the U and St. Olaf, and I was like, she was like, let's just go. They really want you to be on the track team. I really wanted to be on St. Olaf's track team, but I couldn't even get their coach to email me back. So I went to Hamlin, and I met with the coach whose name was Drew, and he was like, you know, you might not have made it to state, but like I see so much potential in you, and you're 6 feet tall, and you're, you know, throwing like 36. Like, we could really, like, if we get you in a good strength and conditioning program, get you working the drills, you could be really good. And that just sold me. But that, and then their academics are really good, and I was like, I guess I'm moving to Minnesota. And as a Wisconsinite, that's like, you know, no man's land. Like, this is where the Vikings are, and
We don't like you either. So.
It's all mutual.
Well, then we got this guy from the worst state, South Dakota. It's just a hole. So.
So the best I ever threw in high school shot put was 36 feet. And my last throw ever at NCAA Nationals my senior year, so my final throw in finals, I threw 47.9.
We're talking shot put here?
Yeah,
Wow,
so
okay.
I put on 11 feet in 4 years in my shot put, and I think we put like 10 inches on my vertical.
How many people did you beat from St. Olaf?
All of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you don't return emails.
Yeah.
Wow. What was were you a disc thrower and hammer, you said also, or what did you?
So in college, usually, unless you're like amazing, you have to choose 2 of the 4 throwing events.
Okay.
So there's javelin, which I'm definitely not built for, discus, which I'm tall, but like I'm not super great with foot movements, and then hammer and shot put. And so we ended up choosing hammer and shot put for me, and indoor hammer is weight throw. So I was conference champion junior and senior year in the weight throw. Interestingly enough, I was better at shot put, but we had a girl who was a national champion in our conference. So she beat me every year in conference and always did better than me at nationals, but it was always someone to chase.
Okay.
Funnily enough, at the Winter Assault, there was a girl who I competed against. She was a multi-eventer, but ended up being like a really good shot putter. Her name's Amelia, and she won the novice class. So we
Really?
had like a little mini reunion while we were there.
Was she kind of the wiry one who was like strong as hell?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was awesome to
Trains on the
watch.
south side?
Tiny.
Yeah.
And
she was strong.
she's always been that little, and so she was like a great hurdler, and then somehow also a great shot putter.
Yeah.
So after me and like 4 other girls graduated, she won conference her senior year. So
shit,
like,
okay.
like put her next to me, right? So she's maybe $130.
Yeah.
And
Noodle,
in college,
yeah.
I was like 250, right? And she's like beating girls that are my size. So
That's
watch
awesome.
out for her. Her name's
Yeah.
Amelia. And,
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was wiry strong.
Yeah, it was
That
impressive to
insane.
watch. What was did you have a growth spurt through college at all, or did I stay the same pretty much?
I was
From
6
high
feet
school to
tall
college?
by the
Okay.
time I was in 8th grade.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
Which down the line we think that caused my permanent back injury. So one of my vertebrae is too far forward.
Really?
And they think I just grew so fast in middle school that it kind of slipped forward. And in college, I was consistently weighing around 250 pounds until my sophomore year. My coach kind of pulled me aside after the season, and he was like, look, like you have so much potential. If you want to be really good, you're going to have to lose some weight. And so by my senior year, I think I was down to around like 220, and that was really helpful. I was just able to move across the ring better and do like footwork better and all of that. But when I started Strongman, it's kind of, again, just like college throwing, there's this, there can be this culture of be as big as possible, eat what you want, because mass moves mass. So I was up to like 242 by my first nationals. And then I had to have abdominal surgery, and so by the time I recovered from that surgery, I was up to 270 pounds.
Wow.
And I got 4th place at my first nationals in the super heavyweights, which was like good, but I was like, I'm never gonna let myself get to like 300 pounds, which is what some of the women were that I was competing against. I'm never gonna be that competitive against them, and I don't feel great about myself. And you don't perform as well when you're like not feeling good about yourself. So I did keto. Before it was cool. I did keto for like 6 months after I had weighed in at like 270 or something. I was like, this is not working for me. And so I was eating like a pound of bacon a day and like 2 dozen eggs, and I lost the first like 50 pounds.
The first 50?
Yeah. Yeah, so
How long did that take?
So that was 6 months.
Okay.
So I dropped it super fast. And then some stuff kind of happened with the coach that I had, and I was kind of left hanging. Didn't have a program, didn't have a coach.
Well, hold on a sec here.
Yeah.
Just
sorry.
real quick, to break this down. Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Sorry, interrupt
okay.
you, but within the 50-pound loss, did you lose a bunch of strength? Did you maintain it? How did that affect your body performance-wise?
I maintained most of my strength because I was training really hard through it all.
Yeah.
And just eating so much protein.
And at this time, what was your objective in training? Was it just to get leaner? Were you doing Strongman, what were you doing at this time?
I was still training for Strongman, training for that year's Winter Assault, and just trying to get down in weight and get as lean as possible.
What would you say you're doing? You know, the keto gets, I guess, rationalized in different perspectives with fat to protein ratios. What were you kind of at with that?
My coach at the time had given me macros to hit, and the only thing I remember is less than 50 carbs a day, and I didn't eat a fruit for like 6 months, which is not good for you, right? Like, I know fruit has sugar in it, but like there's a reason why you're supposed to have a balanced diet.
So you went no carbs basically for this whole training cycle for 6 months?
Right,
And you had a majority of fat to protein or higher?
Yeah, I would get my carbs from like broccoli and spinach and nuts, so those are carbs.
And what were you using for your fat source and protein source?
I was eating a lot of meat. I still do to this day, but I think my friends and I had gone in on a half a cow, so I was eating like tons of beef, lots of bacon. Since I'm a grad student, I was also eating like beef sticks and cheese and hard-boiled eggs like in class.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then, so within all this, let's just talk again, go back a little bit to where you were talking about your your track throwing days.
Mm-hmm.
What type of thrower were you, like when it came to shot put? Were you a straight kickback? Were you a twister? What did you do for your style? And did that carry over into your your strongman training with the footwork at all?
So I was a glider, so that would be the straight kickback.
Yep, that's right.
I didn't have the footwork to be a rotational shot putter.
And it's very hard to do that too.
Right, and especially when you're bigger, like if you can glide and get all of your weight behind the ball, it's going to go a lot farther. But I did have the footwork of throwing hammer, because that is a very technique-heavy throw, like a heel-toe kind of turn. Transferring to Strongman, I think the biggest thing for me has been hip power.
Yeah.
Like stones, if I can lap it, I can load it, because my hips are just very powerful.
And that comes a lot from throwing the shot, because it's all within that last twist rotation of your hips and getting that angle and the arc too within your hips and your elbow and your hand release, right? And then what was the biggest, if there was one beside your own growth as physically, was there anything that helped you get the extra 10, 11 feet from college to high school that you can give credit to in your distance?
I think lots of heavy barbell work. We did lots of power cleans and hang cleans, and lots of footwork drills. So usually practice would start with like 100 different like reps of different footwork drills, and you just kind of compound onto that, and then speed and power. So
a lot of that's similar, it sounds like, within your core, within your your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, and your hips, obviously.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that just correlated between what you're doing within your throwing, your training, and now the strongman stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think there is a big transfer of like anyone who's done power sports or like explosive athletics. you see people kind of go towards strongman or Olympic lifting on the other side of the spectrum. But
Yeah, and I had experience doing power snatches and power cleans. I mean, senior year of college, I was power cleaning 190. I'm sure it was awful form, but I was doing it.
Yeah.
And not dying. So.
Yeah, that's part of the growing process. I think, especially in that age, even if you have the best coach in the world, there's only so many eyes to watch so many athletes. And a lot of the time, you, especially back then before it was, I guess, even a thought of videotaping every single one of your lifts to get your own coaching or you're kind of relying on the feel of things and then your teammates to let you know kind of where you're in tune with the bar, right?
Yeah.
And different things. So it's a lot of, like you said, even if it's not perfect form, at least you have the objective down to get there. It probably carries over to, you said the stones were one of your favorite events to do?
Yeah. I've loaded a 310 stone.
Damn.
So
Now loaded, you mean on a barrier or over a platform or what?
Onto a platform.
Yeah.
It was, I think, 53 is the highest that I've loaded it, which I think is like maybe like mid-chest height for me. And that's another advantage that I have is that I'm 6 feet tall. So there will be women that I compete against that are 6 to 10 inches shorter than me, and so they have to load it on their face to get it that high. Whereas for me, I don't even have to. There's a technique for stones called triple extending that a lot of shorter people have to do. So you're like, oh, I can't move from the mic, but you're all the way back, right? So your hips are extended, your thoracic is extended, and your head is extended. I like rarely have to do that because stone loading is generally like to like waist height for me.
Which helps.
Yeah.
There may be an advantage with your vertebrae issue as well.
Yeah.
Right?
How has that affected like your training, your athletic performance, different things along those?
My second year of strongman, kind of around when I had started to decide to lose weight, I was pulling with like awful deadlift form and definitely exacerbated that injury and like could barely walk. Like missed some classes, missed some work, and I went back to my original sports medicine doctor back in Madison, who had diagnosed my original injury. And I will just say, when she first diagnosed me, I weighed like 225 pounds, maybe 240, and she told me that I needed to lose like 80 to 100 pounds and stop throwing. And I was like, you are a sports medicine doctor, and you're telling me to do the opposite of what I want to do. But that was the only like doctor in my coverage, so I went back to her, and it was basically like the same thing. It was obviously visibly stronger, and she was like, well, you're not going to stop lifting if I tell you to. She was like, it's just, we can't fix it. There's not like a surgery that can fix it. But losing weight has been the best help for me, and then just working on core strength and back strength and the McGill 3. So side planks, bird dogs, and dead bugs.
Can you say what's the McGill 3?
McGill 3, so Stuart McGill is an exercise physiologist. He's like a PhD, and he's worked a lot with Chris Duffin. He has a book called The Gift of Injury, and the big 3 are like 3 core exercises that are supposed to help you with back pain and back injury.
Oh, sure.
So you're supposed to do like 10 reps of bird dogs, 10 reps of side planks for like 10 seconds, and then 10 reps of dead bugs.
Okay.
And there's like variations on that, and
So first of all, I think it's really cool that you're open and honest and just about the weight you've lost and where you were at in the weight, because I think a lot of times it's a sensitive subject for anyone, especially women, about where they were and where you are now. How long have you had the weight off for?
We're closing in on 2 years.
Oh, so it's been sustainable. Now have you sustained the keto part of it?
No.
Or have you been able to go back to more carbohydrates for fuel?
So when I kind of was at an impasse where I lost my coach, and I was like 2 months out from nationals, and it was my first time going to be competing in nationals in the 198-pound weight class.
For strongman, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So that would have been my second nationals, but my first time in that lighter weight class. I started training with Tim and Sue, and it was just kind of like doing whatever. Sue is Tim's wife. And they were like, will you just let us program for you? Like, we know that you lost your coach. And Sue was like, can we get you on an eating plan that's not a pound of bacon a week? Because while you might have lost weight in those initial 6 to 8 months, that's not sustainable for your long-term health.
Sure.
Which is fair, right? Like, red meat is good for female athletes, but eating as much as I was and eating as much bacon and dairy as I was is just like, from a heart standpoint, from an artery standpoint, not great for you.
It's not?
Really?
can have your own opinion.
Yeah. What have you been doing the last 28 years?
And the other thing too is it's really hard after a certain point to keep getting stronger when you don't have carbs. Because carbs are really important for your muscle recovery and your muscle building. And so I was then eating like a bodybuilder, and I still kind of do. And when I say that, I mean like 6 to 7 meals with a protein and either like a vegetable or a carb or both. So I don't even want to know how many egg whites I've eaten in the last 2 years, but it's been a lot. And lots of chicken and fish and lean beef. And then rice and sweet potatoes. She just gave me my new meal plan, and so for the first time I'll be eating Ezekiel bread, which is I think is like something that CrossFitters talk about a lot.
You have to put your pinky up when you
yeah,
do that.
Ezekiel bread. But I think just kind of trying to widen the range from
More
a gut
balance.
health. Yeah, from a gut health standpoint, like
Absolutely.
the wider range of vegetables and fruits and meats and grains that you eat, the better your gut biome is going to be, and then you're going to have better mental health and better physical health.
So with this then, with the adding back in of the other nutrients, do you feel besides you said your biome, your gut health, do you feel like mentally you're more alert? Do you feel like your training has been overall better with the addition of the other nutrients?
Training absolutely has been like 100% better. I was getting stronger for maybe the first 5 months of doing keto, and then it really fell off and I plateaued. And then after a year of doing programming with Tim and Sue and eating the way Sue wanted me to eat, I won nationals. I put on over 100 pounds on my deadlift, like 60 pounds on my squat. My overhead is probably my slowest growing lift, but I still think I've put on like 50 pounds on my overhead.
Wow.
And I just feel better when I'm lifting. I don't lose energy as much. I don't need as much caffeine. I don't need ammonia capsules because the energy is just in me. Now, that being said, when I was on keto, I think I probably had the best semester of school I ever had. And there are tons of scientific studies that from a brain standpoint, keto is really good for your brain. People who have brain cancer, people who have epileptic disorders and things like that, it's shown to really help your brain health. And so I was like very, very clear-minded during that semester, but I'm not like foggy-minded now. It's just not quite as sharp as keto. Just made me feel amazing from that standpoint.
And did you have any drawback from others, or a lot of times, and I guess there's been discrepancies as far as how effective keto is for females. Obviously for you it worked great. Did you feel any like hormonal imbalances, any change for you? Was it a tough period, or did it kind of just go naturally for you?
I don't really remember. I don't think there was anything super significant.
Okay.
From a hormonal standpoint, I think, when I was doing this, I was 22, and I think 22-year-old women also just have crazy hormone stuff. Your body is like, we're supposed to be bearing children right now. And I'm like, no. So there's a big trend right now for women to be going off of birth control. Because they say it messes with their hormones, it messes with their body fat, it messes with their strength. I don't necessarily always agree. I think whatever works for you works for you. Some women do great when they're on birth control. Some people medically have to be on it. I'm one of those people. So that being said, I also was doing keto before it really got super popular, so I never really got any pushback from people. Now I think like you go on the internet and go on Reddit and everyone's bashing keto left and right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I was pretty much done with it by the time it got really popular.
Okay.
There are times still though where if I'm doing a really big cut, so like my cuts for World's Strongest Woman, I cut down to 180, where I'll go no carb for.
So what do you naturally like?
I like 200, 205.
Okay, split 20 pounds or so.
Yeah, which for a woman is kind of a lot.
Yeah.
The first time I ever did that cut, it was relatively easy because my muscle mass wasn't as big, and then this last year it took the longest. It was the most difficult. And so you also do a water load and you sauna, but I actually only had to sauna for a half hour, which is.
Do you have 24-hour weigh-ins then with that too?
Yeah,
Okay.
so all Strongman shows are around 24-hour weigh-ins. So I've gotten IVs after every time I've cut to 180, and you try to drink like a gallon of water before you eat any solids, and you're drinking Pedialyte, and there's been some competitions where that cut has affected my performance, but there's also been some competitions where if I do the the refeed right, that super recomp actually helps you perform better. Which is why you see guys, especially, they'll cut from like 270 to 231 and they just annihilate the class. And they're pounding food and water all night and getting back up to their original weight.
So what, beside the carb intake that Sue reintroduced you to, what's been the change in proteins for you that's helped you gain all this extra weight in your PRs? Has it been more steak or red meat besides just bacon? I mean, what do you attribute to it, I guess?
I think a lot of lean meats. So we kind of switch between chicken, fish, ground turkey, lean beef. If I have the money, bison. But again, I'm a grad student, so I don't often have that money. And then like not like clean carbs, but complex carbs. So I eat oatmeal every day. I usually have sweet potatoes and jasmine rice or brown rice, and just that way you have the energy source, but it's not the carbs that are just turning into sugar and fat. I don't really know that science behind it, so don't quote me on it.
You said grad school like 3 times. You can talk to you.
It's not that kind of grad school.
So, do cheat meals exist in your life, and if so, what are they?
Yeah, sometimes I get a cheat meal once a week. Right now, this week we're starting my new meal plan for nationals, where I'll get one every other week, which is a little sad.
Sue.
Gosh darn it. I usually will go for a burger or sushi. Those are my two mainstays.
I was at a keto last night.
That sounds awesome, right?
Fries come with that burger?
Yes. Yep. You eat everything in the one meal that you want, and then. But also on event days, it's a high carb day, so I get to make sweet potato pancakes and eat like a cup and a half of rice throughout the day, and then I also get a cheat meal afterwards. And then the next day you weigh like 5 to 10 pounds more than you did the day before.
I'd like that sweet potato pancake recipe. That sounds good.
I will ask her if I can share it.
Okay.
She definitely piloted it.
Coveted?
So you said you know your journey through high school into college now, into strongman events. Did you also compete in powerlifting at all before all this?
I competed in one powerlifting meet last year. So I was on internship in Portland, Oregon last year, and so I had the immense privilege of training at Kabuki Strength for a year with Chris Duffin, Brady Cable, Brandon Shen, Rudy Kadlib, who's like an amazing masters powerlifter. And I qualified for USS Nationals, and I had about 6 months until we had nationals, and I was like, when in Rome, right? They're like a huge powerlifting gym. Chris Duffin was the first guy to deadlift 1,000 pounds at 198. And they make all those great specialty bars, and so I was deadlifting on their deadlift bars, and the meet was gonna have those deadlift bars. I was like, I'm just gonna do it. So I did the 198, and it was a USPA meet. And that's when I learned that I'm definitely a strongman deadlifter. So I was able to pull my opener at 418, and then my second lift, I locked it out at 445, but I had like a minuscule hitch that they did not like. And then I tried for 445 again, and I was just cashed. But that is the meet where I first squatted 308, and I benched, I want to say 180.
Okay.
Which I have done more with like a non-pause, but with pause that was pretty good for me because strongmen don't really bench that often.
No.
If you do, it's like close grip or reverse grip.
Sure. So like we were talking earlier, your intensity going into these events really came out in the last weeks. What's your inner drive? What motivates you to win these events?
I have really, really big goals in strongman. I'm not necessarily gonna like tout them here, but I write them down every year, and I know what I'm reaching for, what I want out of this year, what I want out of 5 years, what I want out of 10 years. And so Winter Assault was kind of a stepping stone to wanting to win the overall belt at nationals. So last year I won the 198 pound weight class, but that's looped in with the 181s. And in the 181 pound weight class, Kim Dirks was competing, who is like, she won World's Strongest Woman 2 years ago and is amazing. And her husband is Adam Dirks, who's competed in World's Strongest Man. And so she won, and I expected her to win. And so I'm really gunning for the overall heavyweight belt this year. And so this was a stepping stone. I also, in the last 4 years of competing, have gone from kind of that 8-man strong lift angry mindset to like being really calm before the event. So I know what I need to do. I know how to execute it. I've gone over it a million times in training. So I just do it. I focus and I do it. So when you see me, like after the keg load, for instance, I really popped off and yelled expletives. It's because I had kind of shoved it down, stuffed it down to be calm. I had some competitions, like nationals in 2017. I got too hyped before the sandbag carry, and I dropped the sandbag in the middle, and that cost me the win. And so, like, even still to this day, that bothers me, right? And so I realized I have to be calm before going into these events, and if I'm not calm, I'm gonna mess up. So I'm very calm, cool, and collected. I don't do nose torque. I stopped listening to like A Day to Remember in my headphones before each event, and just afterwards, since I have so much built up adrenaline, I just kind of let it out. Unless it's like the deadlift, where I deadlifted 405 for 11 reps. I was so exhausted, I was like, I can't even yell right now. I'm just gonna smile and walk away.
I think that comes with time with any athlete, is don't waste that nervous energy in the warm-up room, or before the game or whatever. You definitely, that takes time and patience and practice.
Right, and from my standpoint, from being a college thrower to then transitioning to strongman, they're very individual power strength events, right? And so in college, I would get really hyped before a throw, and sometimes it would work, and it worked out for me in the end, but sometimes I would scratch the throw because I was too hyped. And then the same thing was happening in strongman, and since I've been doing strongman for almost 4 years, I learned from myself and from watching others, like, oh, the best people, they don't get like that before they lift. They're very calm. Like, you watch Zydrunas Savickas, right? One of the best overhead press strongmen in the world. He's won World's Strongest Man, like 3 or 4 times?
I think 5.
5 times. Yeah, the most winning is strongman, right? He's so calm. He just like walks around and does the lift, and he might get hype after the lift, but he's not,
And I think the beauty in that is too, he isn't, I could be wrong, but I don't feel like he has all of his training out there like all these other guys do. And I assume he's hitting weights in training that are maybe more than what are in the events. So he just has that kind of cool confidence where he just, does that slow walk up, crushes it.
Yeah, he
and then
like fucking knows.
Gets uncomfortable taking his belt off, and then goes over and smiles and says about 3 words in English. And does a great interview. It's just like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
But it's great to watch.
Yeah, and he trains alone, I think, like under an arena.
You see that? Yeah, like it's
that's insane.
Gladiators can get.
Right.
Yeah, it's so badass.
And maybe he purposely puts himself in that atmosphere to kind of be that nostalgic, but my goodness, that's really cool.
No music, I think, and I'm not that extreme. Like, I like to lift with my friends. It's one of the reasons why I do strongman, and I like to be in a gym where people are getting hype. I train at the gym with Charles Griffin, so it's like, I want to, watch him get hype for his, whatever it is bodybuilders do.
Flex was a mirror.
Yeah.
We were in there lifting one day, and he was like singing, doing leg presses. I'm like, that's awesome.
You always can get serenaded by him on good days at Los Campeones.
Oh, that's fun.
And that is definitely something that it just takes time in strongman to learn about, and to learn about what your personal style is in lifting. And you can see, I didn't make any mistakes on last Saturday at Winter Assault. That takes time, and it's not going to happen at every meet. So in comparison, at World's Strongest Woman, I could, I can see all of the mistakes I've made in my head at that competition and why I got 7th instead of top 3, right? So it just continues to take time, and it takes a lot of introspection, and because of my future career, my whole life is introspection. So I'm continually thinking about how I performed, how I behaved, how all of that, and trying to work on it and make it better.
And I think a great point to that comes with the experience you talked about. Not only that, but I think one of the first strongman competitors we had on here, Joel Dirks, was talking about how Dave Austin, like you, he had taught Joel about using his levers that are going to be best for him when it comes to all the different events, because it's going to be way different than Doug's size or than Dave's size. So same as you, getting the experience over the years, knowing, okay, I'm going to have to approach this different than the person I'm training with, but the more true I see of myself or my technique, it's going to obviously just promote what you're doing even further when you increase your hip drive or increase your acceleration because you have everything else locked in so well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You have to be a student of the sport for sure. I train with Tim Kovac, he's my coach, and he's like 6 inches shorter than me, right? So he knows that not everything that he does is going to work for me, and vice versa. And so some of the things I do is I watch Dave Osland, for instance, because he's like, 6'8", like much taller than I am, but at least closer leverages. Or I will watch Donna Moore's videos because she's around the same height as me, around the same build, and just trying to figure out what technique is going to work for me, because I can't just watch, again, Kim Dirks is amazing. I've competed against her I think I competed against her 5 competitions in a row, and I love watching her, and I learn from her when I watch her compete. But also, she's 5'3", and I'm 6 feet tall, so the things that work for her aren't going to work for me. So I spend a lot of time, watching people on Instagram, because I think half of Strength Sports is on Instagram now, but also YouTubing, old World Strongest Man competitions, watching IFSA, Strongman Champions League, and just really learning what different people do. So we had bag toss at World's Strongest Woman, which we'll have at Nationals too. One, I'm already good at, doing that throwing motion, because that's something that you do in shot put in your training. But also, I was like, okay, the first time they ever did this event was the Arnold in that last year. Rogue made those bags specifically for those guys. So I watched Halfthor throw them. I watched Brian Shaw throw them, and I was like, okay, what's going to work for me? What's not going to work for me?
And then, within that, now you're training. Do you know what events are going to be for your next national meet? And where is that meet at again?
It's going to be in Columbus, Ohio.
Is that in June?
Yeah, June 8th.
Oh, you and Ken could go together. He's going to be there too. We just talked to Ken earlier. Okay, so what events are you going to be doing? He mentioned us. Which ones they are? I don't know if they're different for you though.
So it's the same for everyone. There's axle deadlift, yoke run, sandbag to sled medley, log press, and sandbag throw.
Okay, that's right. So where are you training currently right now? Where are you training at?
I train at Los Campeones Gym.
Okay, and they have everything you're going to need there, obviously, right?
Yeah, and then I also, on Saturdays, will train at Tim Kovac's house.
That's right, the HOS, right?
House of Strength.
House of Strength.
Yeah, we have matching sweatshirts. Join our club.
Timmy.
And he has tons of stuff, because he's been doing Strongman for 11 years now, and just accumulates all of the equipment, or we'll make it. We'll jerry rig it, whatever you have to do. My boyfriend's also a professional strongman who lives in Florida, so I will travel down to train with him, and he also trains in his garage, and he will have different equipment sometimes. And one of the best things you can do if you're going to a show and you don't have access to the specific manufacturer stuff, right? So a Bartos keg or something like that, is just to train on as many different kinds of the same implement as you can. So train on 4 different logs. Last year at Nationals, we had a tire flip, and no one knew, how big the tire was going to be. Was it going to be a fat tire? Was it going to be a log tire? And I was still out in Oregon. I think there was 5 gyms in the area that had tires. So I did a training session at each gym flipping the tire. And some of them were heavier, some of them were lighter, just so I would be ready for any adversity. And come Nationals last year, we were on a gym floor that was slippery as heck, and people were having so much trouble getting the leverage under the tire. And because I had trained in adverse conditions on different flooring with different tires, I didn't have any trouble, and I won that event.
Oh, nice. So you mentioned the World's Strongest Woman competition in the past. What do you think? I don't think I've ever seen it on TV before. I could be wrong, but with the CrossFit and powerlifting, everything evolving, and now Strongman and StrongWoman eventually is going to get there. What do you think has to happen for the sport to grow where it's going to be nationally televised? I mean, is there anything that you think would be able to help accelerate that, or kind of what would your input be on that?
I think you can look to the UK and Europe for really good examples of how Strongman does really well. So I think it was Europe's Strongest Man. They do it in this giant arena over there, and it's televised, and there's so much hype around it. And what they do is they get buy-in from people who want to watch these dudes lift crazy implements, right?
Sure.
And CrossFit is similar, but then also you have the aesthetic of people who look really good, and they have abs, and they're buff, and they're fast. So you have to figure out, what people want to see. And I don't really know what it's going to take in America, because the NFL, first of all, definitely has the corner on the market for
everything.
Arena sports. So World's Strongest Woman was at official Strongman Games. They've had it in America for the last 2 years.
Okay.
It's in North Carolina, and it's put on by Official Strongman. So Official Strongman is the governing body of World's Strongest Man in Giants Life.
Where in North Carolina was it? Do you remember?
It was in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay.
So they do it at an arena in...
Indoors then, or?
Yeah,
okay.
It's like a state fair kind of arena. So
Sure.
it's like kind of heated. In our first year, they brought Sojourner Civicus to compete in the Masters class. And they had some other really big names, and so there was like a pretty big crowd.
Yeah.
And Official Strongman was, really pushing it really hard. And that is World's Strongest Man and World's Strongest Woman for both genders, all weight classes and ages, except for the open men. For the open men, it was a qualifier to the U.S. Giants Live, which is then a qualifier for World's Strongest Man.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of hype, and Official Strongman is trying really hard to really build that up. I think one of the issues that they have is they are a UK-based company, and so they're not like over here. And this year it was like a smaller crowd. I think everyone who was watching was our friends and family.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what it's going to look like. I think now that Rogue is trying to corner the market on Strongman, it might be like what they did for CrossFit.
Exactly.
Also with the Titan Games on TV, so you see Anthony Furman and Charity Witt and Jackie Woods. I think they're the 3 Strongman competitors that competed in the Titan Games on NBC, right, with The Rock.
Yep.
So they're getting lots of publicity for the sport, especially Anthony Furman.
Yeah.
And I would love to see World's Strongest Woman televised the way World's Strongest Man is.
Yeah, when you think about just the event that happened, that Arnold put on for the qualifier for the Arnold in Ohio.
Yeah.
The one he had at Santa Monica Pier, like all the men were qualifying, but if you think about it, you put an event like that on for the women events or on a beach in a different coast, like just the scenic escape alone is going to probably allow people to want to tune in and see it. And then the way that a lot of athletes are these days, you're not going to have all 300-pound women, and if you do, probably going to be jacked by some of these guys. So it's going to be something entertaining to watch as well.
Right. Yeah, and so Strongman Corporation kind of has the corner on the market for women getting to the Arnold. So they do have an Arnold Pro Women's stage.
Okay.
It's not definitely doesn't have the hype that the men have, but they both have the same kind of ways of qualifying. So if you win any of the international Arnolds, and now the one in California as well, then you qualify for the Arnold Classic in Ohio, and then there's a point system where they'll take I think in the men, I think it's the top 5 from the point system. In women, I think it's discretion, and I think some women are getting invites. And the other issue too is you have pro women that are lightweight, middleweight, and heavyweight, but then on the Arnold stage, they're all lifting the same weights. So there are some lightweight women that are getting an invite because they need more women, but it's like, well, you're not going to beat Kristen Rhodes or Donna Moore because they're Kristen Rhodes and Donna Moore, and they weigh like 230 pounds, and they're jacked, and Kristen's been doing strongman for like 20 years.
Yeah.
So it's hard. I think World's Strongest Man has been on TV, since 1983?
70-something.
Yeah, so there's just such a long legacy, and even when ESPN dropped it, CBS picked it up right away.
Exactly.
And Official Strongman, I think, is trying, but I don't know if they don't see women as capable of doing the crazy feats of strength or what.
Well,
It'd be cool
I don't
too.
know. It's almost, I think it's just going to take time. How long has World's Strongest Woman been around now?
I don't know. I want to say like 5 years.
Okay.
So it's so new. Like I'm just thinking of Olympic weightlifting, which actually has a lot of ties into Minnesota, Missouri, and everything else where it actually started.
Mm-hmm.
So that was back, I believe, I think it kind of picked up late 80s, early 90s. So now, I mean, if we didn't have women in Olympic weightlifting or CrossFit, it wouldn't be a thing. Like we would not have the popularity.
Right.
So my point is, I think with time, I think it will take off. Mm-hmm. And if they do it right, obviously with like bodybuilding, they cut the
Not
The
physique.
female bodybuilding.
yeah, they cut a division because it started to
classic,
not be
yeah.
feminine,
Yeah.
right? So I think if they stay true to the purity of the sport, which I don't see that not happening,
Right.
it'll take off.
And I think one of the problems that they run into, to be frank, one of the reasons why women in CrossFit, get so much publicity is because there's sex appeal there.
For sure.
And I think not everyone finds the sport of strongman as sexy for women as something like CrossFit. They are going to be bigger, they're going to be stronger. I mean, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and I don't want to be everyone's cup of tea, but it doesn't sell as well, right? Like Nike isn't going to pick up a strongman athlete the way they're going to pick up a CrossFit athlete. And the women don't care. That's not why we do the sport. We're not here to look pretty. We're here to lift heavy shit. But there's definitely like a double standard there for sure.
But in even credit to what you said there, it's almost like Robert Oberst's shirt, strong is pretty.
Yeah.
So in a way, I mean, you go ahead and, which I wish that whether it's Rogue or whoever figures this out, to almost, it's never going to be that big, but just once a year, you almost correlate to Shark Week or to the Olympics, and you have a different event every night for the world's strongest man, so you don't got to worry about setting up 3 events in one day. Either have them all set up, and let's do it live, tune every night to ESPN or whatever it is. You do the same thing for the women's. The women's are on at 5, the men are on at 7, the next night it flips. Whatever, if they ever figure it out to make it live, and like you said, just bringing on some of these athletes alone, just by, like we were giving you grief about your intensity. Honestly, if there's some young kid at home watching that or whatever, and they see that, that's probably going to inspire a lot more kids or anyone than not seeing it. You know what I mean? So I think in a way, it's, if it ever gets a chance to be published in front of a lot of people, it could just take off. I could be wrong.
I think too the connection would be with that way more than CrossFit. Honestly, just in the sense that you look at the games, that's like your 0.02%, right? Like you go to any CrossFit gym or even Olympic weightlifting club, they all don't look like, none of them look like that, if one at best. Like, you know what I mean? Where all of a sudden you could appeal to the masses where, I mean, let's be real. I think most guys like a little more junk on there rather than some twig, right? So, I don't know. And it's one thing, too, I think with, we were talking about this earlier, I think with Strongman, it's almost not necessarily in the words of attainable, but you could see maybe more personal success rather than compared to CrossFit to where, well, I'm a woman, I can never do a muscle up. Or like some bigger guy like myself, I couldn't fucking do one. But all of a sudden, could I do a heavier yoke carry? Yes.
Right.
So I think again with time it'll probably stack up and start to happen. So.
And one of the reasons why CrossFit is so popular is because there's so many CrossFit boxes across the country. So then everyone wants to tune in because it's like, well, I do that sport.
Yes,
so,
yes.
And that's why football is so popular too, right? There are tons of people that are like, either they played high school football or they were a cheerleader or whatever. And I mean, in my opinion, football has become America's pastime. Just it's like the most relatable thing, even though it's not. And that's the funny thing. Like the NFL is so beyond anyone's capability, whereas in strongman, like the people have everyday jobs, right? They're, Tim is he manages electricians, and there's math teachers, and so like. The woman that I know that's a math teacher that does strongman, her students love it, right? And it's my hope, and I'm sure it's her hope that, as they get older, they're gonna be like, I'm gonna go try that event.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna go try to train for that. It's like a people sport for sure.
Well, I think, hell yeah. And it doesn't have to be, no matter what it is, people need to find an outlet besides working, raising kids, and then going to die.
The general lack of activity.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a huge attainable thing. But yeah, I like you said, I think with time and people will figure it out. I think it's already happening.
Well, and that's the beauty of it. Like, to know that you're not just watching a pro athlete that's there to compete and leave. You're not going to, to know that this person is training endlessly for this dream, for this one chance, and yet they do stuff on the side, right? They do have a main job. This is their side gig to try and see if they can win this event. That's I think the thing that you kind of have a connection with, which might be the popularity of it that grows with it too. For you though, you mentioned a few people in passing here who are either, who are some people now that you look up to that give you guidance or that you look up to help you reach to where you want to go to right now?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, my coaches, Tim and Sue, they both have been doing strongman for so long, and they have such a wealth of knowledge and are just really great people, and they really want to help the sport and help me personally. So I'm always looking up to them, and they're also quite a bit older than me, so they just have this life experience and maturity that I look up to. And then Kristen Rhodes is one, if you don't know who she is, you should probably Google her. She's the most winningest strong woman in history. When she first started doing strongman, there were not women competitions, so she was just competing against the men. Yeah, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, she's won, all the different forms of worlds, because there's like 3 different forms of worlds for women because of the different leagues. Donna Moore, who is in the UK and has won the Arnold, and she got second at World's Strongest Woman this year. Her and Andrea Thompson took 1 and 2. Andrea Thompson's another UK strong woman. Kim Dirks is someone, she's going to be competing in the Arnold in like 2 weeks, so she's trying to become a professional strong woman in the Strongman Corporation, but she's been around since before Strongman Corporation and USS split. So she has, like, I was just talking to her the other day, and she's like, yeah, I was at the first Arnold ever that they had for women, and I was like, holy crap, like, that's amazing. And I've actually been able to compete against her, and I learned something from her every time I compete against her. Similarly, competing against Leafa Ingalls, who has been doing strongman for a long time and won this year. From a male standpoint, I've had the privilege of meeting Martins Licis. When I went to Barcelona with my boyfriend who competed in the Arnold Spain there, Martin's parents actually live there. So we got to like hang out with him and his parents for like 3 days, and just like learning about how he is very much a student of the sport and is very dedicated to it. He's one of the few people that you'll find who like their whole like career is centered around strongman. Love watching, Brian Shaw on YouTube. Honestly, my boyfriend Andrew Clayton, who's a pro in middleweight and heavyweight, like we started dating and I wasn't really like as into strongman as I am now, and just like from his wealth of knowledge, he's been doing strongman for 10 years since he was 16. So just learning from him. Yeah, I think I could keep going, but
How'd you guys meet? Was it an event or?
Yeah, we met at a strongman competition. My first non-USS show, non-United States Strongman show, and one of my first times really traveling for strongman. We went to North Carolina for a trained strongman. That's another kind of strongman organization. They were putting on a pro-am for Strongman Corporation. So I was an amateur and he was a pro. And I watched him break the middleweight world record for circus dumbbell press. So I think he pressed 270 at 231 body weight. So that's a 1-arm press. And I went to my coach at the time. I was like, "Who's that?" And he was like, "Well, that's Andrew Clayton, but I'm pretty sure that he wouldn't be into you." Which, like, screw you, because we're dating now. But I didn't like do anything because I was like, he was competing, I was competing. He, was very intense. And actually, on his Facebook, he had on there that he was engaged. Turns out that was a joke. You know how like when you're like 17, you put engaged as a joke on your Facebook status? He did that and he never changed it. But so he actually kind of slid into my DMs on Instagram. Like,
So all DMs.
So like, dude, don't give up.
Slide in.
Yeah, shoot your shot, because it worked. And we've been doing distance for like almost 2 years now, which is kind of a pain in the ass, but we both have really big goals. And
why doesn't he move to Minnesota? What's the problem?
Yeah, so he lives in Jacksonville, Florida, so it's probably
horrible.
Like 70 degrees there.
Terrible.
Some places just the whole time.
Way too much vitamin D.
And it's so huge.
And when we first started dating, I was actually living in Oregon. So like Oregon to Florida is like the farthest apart you can get. But we're just waiting. So I graduate in May, and I find out in a little less than 2 weeks where I'm placed.
Okay.
So like as I graduate and have to move to wherever they tell me I have to go.
And what are you in grad school for?
So I'm in grad school to be a pastor.
Okay.
So it's technically called a Master of Divinity. It's a theological graduate degree. So I've been doing that for 4 years. I was in Oregon on internship in a church, so it's kind of like contextual education for a year. So when I'm graduate and I get my master's, then they kind of tell you what region you have to go to, and you can interview with churches there. So it's my hope that they'll place me somewhere where there's a strongman gym, if you're listening.
Or start one.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I do think one day it would be really cool to converge my 2 passions, so ministry and strongman. I don't really know what that looks like.
You just pray for gains.
We've been, actually, I was just going to say what gym name we've been throwing around, my boyfriend and I, but actually I'm going to keep that under wraps. I'll tell you guys when we're not recording, because I don't want anyone to steal it. But yeah, I do think that those are going to converge eventually, like in a big way. in a smaller way, you know, when I was out in Oregon being an intern pastor, I had people, you know, seeing the way I eat and how active I am and how dedicated I am to the sport, kind of changing their lifestyles, like coworkers and other people. I mean, it's not even like I'm like proselytizing Strongman onto them. It's just they were inspired.
But you are.
I was just, you know, being myself. And when I was a youth director at a local church in St. Paul, that was a really great way for me to connect, especially with the boys, like the high school boys. Like, how much can you bench?
Arm wrestling competition at the lunchroom.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I actually took some kids on a mission trip in, I think it was 2017, maybe 2016. And like they were like, our youth director does Strongman, like, because we were with other kids. And the one kid was like, well, you have to arm wrestle me because I'm like a really good arm wrestler. And he actually beat me. So.
So did you turn into like the Rocky for a monitor and throw a log in the chat? Start like challenging all the kids?
Yes. No. And he was like a really noodly kid. So I was like, I hope he started weightlifting after that because he could probably he should do like the arm wrestling championship or
Those
whatever.
wiry guys always surprise you.
I know.
Maybe he's listening today.
Maybe.
So what would you say to anybody that's, you know, female or male really, but any especially female kids or people that want to get into the sport? What encouragement would you give to them? What advice, I should say, would you give them to expect to come in? It's obviously not going to be easy,
Right.
but what advice would you give to anybody that's thinking about maybe crossing over from powerlifting or physique shows or just anything?
I do this all the time, especially at my gym. I'm like, you should do Strongman. Like, I think I convinced my manager to do Strongman the other day.
Just by that?
Just by saying,
I'm in.
Just give it a try. Like,
Okay.
The worst that can happen is that you're gonna hate it, and then you don't have to do it anymore. When I first started Strongman, my sister had like met the guys who owned the first gym that I trained at, like on a whim, and she was like, "They do Strongman, and like you look like you're built to do that. Like, here's their card. Like, I really think you should check it out." And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I'm ever gonna love something as much as I loved being a shot putter and hammer thrower. But finally, I caved and went and met them. And Mike Congdon, who was my first coach, he was like, "Just give it a try. Like, why don't you come and let's do a yoke run and let's try a stone." So my first time ever doing stones, I loaded a 180 stone, which was like pretty cool. And like I was instantly hooked. So just give it a try. I would also say like, there's always that stigma of like women shouldn't get too bulky. And if you're already doing powerlifting, you've probably already like said F that, like I'm not into that. But I think there are a lot of women even who maybe do CrossFit that like think Strongman looks really cool, but they're like, I don't want to get bulky because like CrossFit is about being fit. And the thing about Strongman is like, it is what you make it. So if you want to be big and bulky, there are definitely ways that you can do that. But the thing is you have to actually try to get big and bulky. It's not just going to happen from doing Strongman. Honestly, for me, it's been I've gotten thinner and like more fit. So
I'm so glad you said that. We get so many people like, you know, I don't really want to like lift weights. I just want to get big and bulky. Oh yeah, because that's the agenda.
Right.
It takes so much work to do that.
And your programming is so good that after the first week, they're already getting bulky.
Yeah, they're already too big,
Right.
man. Like, yeah.
And so I'm at a standpoint where like the other day I was like, oh man, my quads are getting bigger. This is awesome. So I've definitely like gone past that where like I'm not gonna cut to 180 anymore either. I'm just like, it's too difficult of a cut as a 6 foot tall woman. Like being 180 is like when you're strong is a stretch. And so like we have this new thing like big girls only. Like I'm just gonna be as big as possible. I'm not ever gonna let myself get to the unhealthy point that I was at, you know, when I weighed 270, but I'm gonna get big, especially like if I'm not doing 180, then I am gonna be competing next year against Kristen Rhodes, against Donna Moore. I gotta be as big as possible.
Especially if you put it on the right way.
Yeah.
It can be a completely different body type.
Well, there's a certain point too. If you start cutting weight, if you're cutting into muscle,
Right.
what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Especially as a strength athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah, my last cut to 180 was a huge struggle, and I found like a before and after photo, or like I had taken a photo of my cut from last year's cut to 180 versus this year's, and like the muscle growth is like insane. And I was like, no wonder I'm struggling so much. Like I don't have anything to lose anymore. Like we don't want to cut into the muscle, as you said. We did the water cut exactly the way you're supposed to, so it came off, but it's just not sustainable anymore, and I don't want to cut carbs anymore.
Yeah, you're happy now.
Yeah, yeah.
So what, you know, without, I guess, saying everything you don't want to say on here, but what are some of your long-term goals? And then from that standpoint, if you stay healthy, and you go, formally for a long time in this, have you still thought about coaching yourself in the future when you get enough experience, or I guess, where are your goals for the future of your health going forward with this? And do you have anything else that's more important to you down the road once you reach the pinnacle of this?
Yeah, so like in the short term, I'm tunnel vision on USS Nationals right now. That's like right after my graduation from grad school, so everything else other than that is kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
If things work out well, I want to win the 200-pound weight class at Strongman Corporation Nationals so I can qualify for the Arnold.
Yeah.
I would love to get my pro card in Strongman Corporation. Then you get to compete in Strongest Woman in the World, which is the one worlds that I haven't gotten to compete in yet, and America's Strongest Woman, and a few other kind of pro opportunities. I would love to win USS Women's Worlds. I got second place last year in that. Long term, in the next 5 years, I would really love to win World's Strongest Woman. That's like the big one that I did in North Carolina in the open heavyweight class. That's going to take a really long time because I was cutting down to middleweight for that class. So that's like maybe 5-year goal. I just want to be the best I can be, and I have like personal goals, like career goals, and like I want to start a family, but I want to do a lot of the strongman stuff first because I'm only 25.
That's
so
what I mean,
I would love to do that like before, and then because so I've heard when you have kids, it kind of changes everything. So.
That's why none of us have kids yet.
When you see like the NBA athletes I know, or the WNBA athletes, I mean, might be the closest example of when they take time off when they have kids and whatnot to come back, being a woman's strongest woman competitor. So within that too, I think you look at some of the men, and it takes them 5-10 years before they're actually get to the point where they feel like they can compete at that biggest stage. So it's a long haul.
Oh hell yeah! I remember when I was a kid watching that. All of a sudden, you'd see a newcomer and he's like 32, and you're like, "Fuck."
Yeah, there's a lot.
Takes strength takes a lifetime.
It does.
Like not everyone is going to be a Matthias Kielikowski or Martins Lisi's, where you're in your 20s and you're getting to compete at World's Strongest Man. Like
they're the very 1%.
Right. Adam Dirks was another one. I think he was 25 or 24 when he competed. Like that takes a lot.
Well, then to get that high, not are you consistent? Are you there every year? How long are you in it, or did you climb that high and fall fast too?
Or are you like a Brian Shaw, where like every year you get better and better and better, and then you kind of hit your peak,
That's why it's fun to watch, to see how far Matthias and Martins can take it, because we're kind of watching their beginning in the past few years now, and then they're both, good at different events. They're almost pushing each other. Like it's fun to see where that's going to grow to if they can both stay healthy enough to continue to grow. And who knows what the hell Larry Wheel's going to do. So it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Oh, Larry. Yeah, and people love to give Larry Wheel shit, but I mean,
he's doing it. He's trying.
He's trying it, and that's what anyone can do. Obviously we don't all have the social media presence that Larry Wheels has. But
have you checked out the ironhuddle.com?
Say it again. Oh,
have you checked out the Facebook page, the Iron Huddle?
Yeah, go follow Iron Huddle. You can follow my Instagram too if you want.
Okay.
Reach 2,000.
We'll get to that later.
And that's the thing. Like, I try really hard to support, like, quote, freshmen in the sport. Obviously, I want to win. So, like, first and foremost, my narrow-mindedness is win the event. But outside of that, and after each event, trying to be supportive, trying to help people out as much as I can. And I love seeing new people in the sport. And I love watching, like, especially the newer women that are maybe even at a higher level than I am already. Like, Hannah Artigue is someone to watch. Jody Kennedy. These are, like, middleweight strong women who are competing in the Arnold. Who are, like, going to be giving Leafa and Kristen and them, like, a run for their money.
Were one of those Mitch's wife? I think she was.
No, it's Lacey Hughes.
Yeah.
So so that was actually the person that I was the most scared to compete against this past
really?
weekend.
Yeah.
Because I watched her compete at Women's Worlds, which is the USS show in October, and she was a super heavyweight and she killed it. And she lost
a lot to compete.
Yeah,
right?
So she did her first cut down to 198, and I was like, of course she's coming for me, right? So she's great, and she's doing the XPC deadlift at the Arnold, and I think is going for a 500 pull. So that's really cool. That's one of my goals for the year too. I pulled 475 in October at Women's Worlds, and so am hoping that I can, after nationals, pull 5 or more.
Wow.
Pulling 405 for 11, even though I technically call it 7, because like my last 4 reps was like turtle back.
Yeah, how's your back feel? That looked
Oh man, we all saw that and we're like, oh my
so
god.
that like is how I used to deadlift. Like
Really?
I deadlifted like with awful form up until about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
It just like it didn't click.
Okay.
And then Tim and I like kind of took a step back after World's Strongest Woman, where you could wear a suit for the deadlift, and we had a deadlift medley. So it was, I think, 375, 405, 455, 475. And with a suit, I should have been able to pull 475 again, and I missed it. And it's definitely because I did that kind of turtle back with my back. And it's also like embarrassing. Like everyone sees it. Like even if you are not a competitive weightlifter and you see that, you're like, that looks gross.
Yeah, I looked
That's
away. I
not
don't want to
how
be a part of it.
Yeah. So my first 7 reps at the 405, I was in my back was like the best it's ever looked. And so we've been really intentional about strengthening my upper back and getting in a good starting position.
Sorry, do you think that's because it was touch and go versus rest and go?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's a part of it because it's easier, like as you're lowering it down, to stay in that position.
Yeah.
But it's definitely been a mental game too, to like remember how my back is supposed to feel, remembering how I'm supposed to activate my hamstrings and my glutes. And I think anytime you're doing, max effort or max reps, like some form breakdown is fine and acceptable, especially in strongman, right?
Yeah.
Like strongman is lift the weight however you can, right? Wear as many belts as you want. Like strap
We need more
in,
belts.
put on your knee wraps. Like you watch World's Strongest Man, and there's some dudes who will wear knee wraps in the yoke. And so usually it's because they're like battling some sort of like quad or knee injury.
Yep.
But strongman is not powerlifting. You don't have to be perfectly smooth on the way up. There's an art to a good deadlift hitch, right? Like if you can get it to the right positioning and you're doing something for reps, it's going to be really helpful. So we weren't overly concerned, but when I missed that deadlift, we were like, okay, well, that was definitely a starting position and a back positioning. Like, let's take a look, let's take a step back. And so actually, like, for Winter Assault, I only trained for like maybe 6 weeks leading into it, because I took time off after Worlds, and then it was Christmas and New Year's. So we had like a 6-week training cycle, and we did not peak my deadlift for that. We're peaking my deadlift for nationals and for a 500 pull. And so I was pulling like really light, like 335, just working on my back stuff and keeping it straight and activating my hamstrings the way I'm supposed to.
Okay.
And even in just those 6 weeks of working on my back, I pulled 11 reps on the deadlift. So
You gotta be happy with that.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. This one thing too is to pinpoint a weak link in the chain, obviously, because your legs might have the drive, but something else is going on.
Right.
So,
And sometimes it's even just an activation issue, or like maybe you need an adjustment from a chiropractor or whatever, and that'll make it so then you can activate your lats better.
Yeah. Do you so this 500-pound deadlift, is that the event for reps or just one pull at the nationals you're talking about?
That's actually a personal goal. So
Okay,
at
okay,
nationals,
okay.
we have a 405 deadlift again, but it's on
I
an
see.
axle from
Yeah, a little
13
bit like-
inches.
Yeah, that's what Ken would say. Okay. So how important is it to you that you are in a relationship with a strongman? Is it greatly important for you think just, I guess, relationship that you are dating someone who's in the same, you can, bounce off ideas and struggles and.
I think it's more important for him.
Of
And
course,
he's actually going to be here in about a month, so
Okay.
maybe you guys want to. I
Okay.
don't know if you're only doing Minnesota people, but if you wanted him on the podcast, I'm
yeah,
sure.
we don't really like people from Florida, so no, we'd love to have him on.
But he's consistently talked about how much of a blessing it is for him that I understand his goals and I understand like what his like plan for the next year, for instance, is, right? So he at official Strongman Games qualified for Giants Live. So if he gets top 3 at Giants Live, he'll be at World's Strongest Man in 2020.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's super cool, and I'm never like, that's a huge lifelong goal, and I am never gonna be presumptuous enough to think that me and my relationship ideals are more important than that. Obviously, like, he treats me well, and we have plans for our future, but like, that's a huge goal, Like, people have definitely lost relationships because they don't understand that goal. And in turn, he understands, like, I'm really focused on graduating right now, and I'm really focused on my strongman goals. And so to have someone who understands like, hey, I'm going to be in the gym for 3 hours and probably not going to respond to your text message. It's totally fine, you know?
Thank God.
Yeah.
There's hope.
You know, like,
yeah, there's hope, Mad Dog.
And you know, it sometimes it takes finding someone from Florida. So maybe we can get you connected with some people down there. But
Let's keep talking.
I actually mimight be in Florida in March, so.
Hey, if you want to deadlift or lift in a 95-degree gym, garage gym.
You know that we would melt down there, right?
Yeah, so going down there to train is like kind of torture for me because it's really so warm. And like here, even in the summer, most of the gyms are air conditioned because we don't do well with the heat because this is our normal, right? Yeah. 20 degrees is our normal. But yeah, back to that point, I just think as a woman who's 6 feet tall and is visibly muscular, is going to be a pastor and is really, really into strongman, like having someone who understands all of those things, I honestly didn't think I was ever going to find someone who understood that, but coincidentally, like Andrew's parents were both church musicians when he was growing up, so like how the heck did we get so lucky? I don't know. And of course, like when he's on podcast, he makes a point to like not talk about me in case like something were to happen. So like watch like
he's gotta keep his options open.
Better not. So it's really important to find someone who gets it, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be doing the sport too, because that's, you know, not the case for everyone, but someone who respects that you have goals and it's really important in your life. It's like, you know, if your goal was to become CEO of your company and you're in a really important interview about that and your girlfriend is getting really upset because you're not texting her back, it's kind of the same thing for these high level strongman athletes or any athletes, you know, like is an NFL linebacker like checking his phone during practice? So you just have to have perspective. Like, don't be so presumptuous that like you're the most important thing in someone's life. I don't know. Maybe I'm gonna get shit for that later. Like, maybe people are like, your boyfriend doesn't treat you right.
It's your perspective. I think.
No, I think you nailed it on the head. I think most people. There's times where I don't want to call it selfish or selfless on either side, but you need to definitely still stay true to who you are and not give up things.
Right.
And they need to understand that.
Yeah.
I think one of the most public, displays of that we see too is when you talked earlier with Brian and Carrie Shaw. Yeah. How he's really grateful for her understanding his schedule, and they make it work with their family and their kids. I mean, they're very public about how they go about it and how they do the Q&A together with fans, questions, stuff. Right. So I think it is an understanding. I think you're right. It might be hard in situations where two people have their own agendas, and if one doesn't, whatever it is in life. But especially when you're giving so much time to one thing, beside if you have a really time job or you're in school, it's a huge commitment.
Right. And I think growing up, my parents were a really good example of that because they had hobbies separate from one another.
Okay.
Like I think when you're in a relationship with someone, you don't become each other, right? That's really unhealthy if you're like trying to become just one unit. You gotta have your separate, maybe, and even if it's like, I love reading mystery novels. I spend, my after work, I'm gonna go read a mystery novel. That's not something that your partner has to be doing with you. In fact, that would be annoying. So like my parents, like my dad has his car stuff and my mom has her art stuff, right? So they do it separate, and they have friends even separate from each other. And I think that's really healthy. So I grew up with that understanding of like, I don't have to become my partner, and that person doesn't have to be my world. And I think as a female who's going to be a leader in an organization, in a church, and is also, I try to be a leader in the strongman world, that's really important, because if I was just like giving up everything for a relationship, then I wouldn't be where I am today.
Mm-hmm. So, maybe it is the faith that you have, but what is one thing that you are really, maybe just this week too, it doesn't have to be everything to you, but what's something you're really interested in people don't know about besides strongman in your personal life? What's something that you enjoy, that gets you to escape from all this stuff, if there is a sense of escape for you?
Yeah, so living in the Pacific Northwest for a year, I kind of learned that I really love hiking and I really love being outdoors.
Okay.
So this summer on my road trip back from Oregon to come back for my last year of school, I did like a 2-week solo road trip. And one of the things I did is I went to Glacier National Park and I hiked the Continental Divide with a 93-year-old Vietnam veteran.
Holy shit.
So we got connected through so when the internet first started, and this is before my time. This is
Tim can tell you about it.
Yeah. Everything was, I guess, like forums. So like you would like start a forum, kind of like what Reddit is now, but that was like the whole internet.
Yeah.
So when I was going to Glacier National Park, I was originally going to hike stuff alone, and then I learned that there's like grizzly bears everywhere, and that's very dangerous. So I was like trying to find like hiking groups, like maybe there's like, a daily hiking group that goes somewhere, and I came across this forum called Glacier National Park Chat that like these old guys.
A lot of serial killers probably.
Yeah, probably. Yep. I probably narrowly.
You got
skirted
lucky.
Death. No, this guy, he was a Vietnam veteran and then a biomedical engineer, and when he retired from doing that, he moved to Kalispell, Montana. And just like hikes in Glacier, like he works a part-time job, and then in the second half of the day, like goes and hikes.
It's got to be amazing.
Yeah, and he takes people, not usually just one person, but he has taken other grad students before who are coming for whatever reason and don't have other people to hike with, and don't necessarily want to do like the easy family hikes. Like, so the hike we did is technically an off-trail hike. It's called Dragon's Tail, and the beginning is like everyone's on it. So you have like kids in Crocs and flip-flops and carrying Barbie dolls, and here we are with like our hiking sticks and our boots and our water packs, and then all of a sudden we go off trail and it's like a 9-mile hike, and it's me and this 93-year-old guy.
And you're trying to keep up with him.
Yeah,
right?
dude.
Yeah, he out-hiked me the entire time. But like leading into that, like I didn't tell my parents, I didn't like tell my friends that I was doing it, because they're like, no one wants their 25-year-old daughter to go hiking with a stranger, right? Like, what the heck? But he like sent me like a video like explaining the hike we were gonna do, and then we met for dinner the day before. And
Even the fact that he knows how to use all that's amazing.
Right, yeah, and he's like 6'6", like maybe $150, right? So I knew that if something were to happen, I'll just push him over.
I was like, you sure it wasn't Sasquatch you fucking met?
Pick up the stone here.
Kick your knee.
Fuck this guy if he comes at me.
I was not worried at all, and he was like a sweetheart, and we ended up having like a very spiritual conversation, and like you really learn to trust someone when you're so like the Continental Divide, like the last probably mile of it was like 2 feet wide and like drop off on either side, and that's why they call it the Dragon's Tail. And then there's like they call it high exposure, so it's like you're stepping over like a 2-foot crevasse, and it's like you fall and you're gonna die. It was like probably the craziest thing I've ever accomplished, and you're not like geared in or anything, you're just hiking it, and so you really learn to trust this stranger that you met on the internet. So I'm not advocating that young women go and hike with strangers. Like I feel like this is getting down the path, but like
he's 93, he has nothing to lose.
Right. But and then you get to the top and you can see like all of Glacier National Park, and you're at the top of the world. And I started crying. I was like, "This is amazing!" Like, whether you're religious or spiritual or not, like the world we live in is super like beautiful. And for me, it's like, wow, like this is divine in my opinion. And then you have to hike back.
So I can imagine you like that scene from Rudy with his dad. First time he sees the northern field, he just says, "This is the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen." And I can just see the old man sitting there taking a swig of whiskey. I can just, two completely different,
You're totally
right.
Yeah.
Funny thing, I just watched Rudy for the first time in December.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. So like one
movie.
of the things about me that my friends like to joke about is if there's a movie that you're gonna make a reference to, chances are Jessica hasn't seen it. So like you made a Rocky reference, and I was like, yeah.
You're that person?
Yeah.
That's all we do.
Oh, you had no idea. Well, you have a homework assignment this week.
Yeah.
Especially before your national competition.
Right.
You watch that or Braveheart if you haven't seen it? Or
I have seen
Gladiator?
Braveheart, yes.
Okay. Gladiator?
No. Is that
Watch
the one where he goes,
Russell
"Are you
Crowe?
not entertained?" Oh, that's
Yes.
300. Okay.
Oh, okay, a newer age one, kinda. Cinderella Man?
Yeah, that's still good.
That's
yeah.
a good. Wow.
Another Russell
Nope,
Crowe.
I haven't
Russell
seen that
Crowe.
one.
Dumb and Dumber.
Yes.
Okay, have you at least seen Chris Farley movies?
Yeah, especially because he's from Milwaukee.
Okay, good. Because
There
earlier
you
I
go.
dropped up Chris Farley and no one said anything.
What'd you say?
Oh, I did the oh my god.
Oh, I missed it.
Oh, just to say a few cents on brake pads.
Yeah, my 8th grade geography teacher actually grew up with Chris Farley. So,
Really?
Fun fact. You can cut that out later.
Did he or she party like Chris Farley?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I don't
good.
think he did. But like, yeah, they went to high school together, and no,
Well, that's a good
That's
point.
pretty cool, though.
It's funny because they're talking on the KFAN morning show this week that Chris probably would have been 55 or something this week if he was still alive.
Really?
But yeah, it's crazy. They're trying to say to the kids growing up today, Carter, wake up. Do you know who Chris Farley is?
Wow.
Wow. And they're making a reference, so Carter had no idea when I asked him. They're kind of the same as our generation knowing about John Belushi or Jim Belushi. See?
John? Yeah, I know who he is.
So
yeah.
kind of a bit the same sense as was he as big of a deal as Chris Farley, and vice versa. So me asking Carter, he just no idea what I'm talking about.
It would be like, Chris Rock or who's the other guy? Wow.
I know who you're talking about, Kent. The cocaine guy, right?
Not Bill Kesney. What?
No, there's a comedian who was sorry, but
it's not Don Cheadle. Anyways,
we can cut all this out.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, Anthony, this is your part. But anyway, so if people want to get in touch with you and follow you, where do they want to see you? Are you on Instagram, I assume?
Yeah, so my Instagram is at, I'm just going to spell it, JESSKAH_P, so Jessica P.
Can you say it one more time, please?
Yeah, JESSKAH_P.
Okay. Are you supported by like Rogue Fitness or anybody in the industry yet?
No sponsors.
But you're open to it, right?
If anyone wants to sponsor me from a meal prep company, that is like the biggest struggle that I have as a student and a full-time employee, like getting all my food prep just from a time standpoint and from a budget standpoint. So like, if you want to give me free food.
Yeah. Nice. Awesome. You guys have any other questions at all?
No, this was awesome.
It was good.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming around, and hopefully we get to talk to you again and watch you compete and win in the Nationals, and maybe even have your boyfriend on if you're still together at that point. And we'll move forward from there.
Breaks up with me after he listens to this.
Yeah.